Okay, I'm back again. This time we're going to talk about putting these pieces together. And I want to preface this with, if you're a very, very beginner and the cutting just scared you and you're not sure about that, and then this piecing is about to scare you, then I highly, highly, highly recommend that you bring your block into the store anytime over the next month. The girls will help you pre-shrink. They'll show you how to rotary cut. They'll take you to the machine area and show you how to put it together so that you are all set to get your first block done. So the next thing you're going to do is get your instruction sheet out. Okay, make sure you know what colors are what, but what I've done is I've gone through and I've done the instruction and I've put the picture underneath. And then step 2, step 3, step 4. On there are little tiny arrows, and the arrows are pointing in the direction that you press your seam. Okay, so because if you look at this, there's so many seams that are going to come together. In quilting, we do something called matching seams. The easiest way to match a seam is if you have your seams pressed in opposite directions. So this is going to ensure when you go to put it together that your seams are pressed in opposite directions. Okay, so step number 1 is going to be to make a rail, what we call a little rail fence block. So this is your rail fence. Okay, so this is light number 1, light number 2, light number 3. Light number 1 does need to be on the outside. These two can be interchanged to be anything that you want, because the light number 1 is going to have a place where it touches that it's important that it's not in certain places. So you just want that one on the outside. The way we construct this is we put these are 1.5 by 3.5. We put them right sides together. We're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam down this side. Okay. Now we need to press. So I'm going to bring you over to the iron and show you that this is a little mini iron. When you're working with very small pieces, it's best to work with a small iron, because if you start pressing with your giant iron, you're going to be going off the edges and around, and you're going to end up with some stretched out pieces. Working with this small iron, I can control exactly where I'm putting the iron. The first thing I always do is put it down, and I do what's called setting the seam. I just put the iron on it and set the seam. Now, in this block, I've told you to press the seams out towards the outside. When you want to press the seams away from a strip, put that strip on top. And then you can just flip this over, and you're going to take the edge of your iron and just push it over onto the seam. Notice I'm pressing, I'm not ironing. This is ironing, this is pressing. If you iron your block, you're going to push it around, and there's a good chance you'll get it all distorted. We're going to do the same thing on this side, right sides together, sew a 1/4 inch and press this. You will have 4 of these. At this point, this should measure 3.5 inches, and if you're a beginner especially, I would measure this and see how close you are. All the units we make will end up measuring at 3.5 inches. The other thing you want to measure, you may find the outside looks good, but you want to measure the center piece, because this should now measure 1 inch. This is finished because it's sewn on both sides. If it's not measuring 1 inch from there to there, if it's more, you need to take more of a seam allowance. If it's less, you need to take less of a seam allowance. So you're going to make 4 of these, and that's step number 1. Okay, step number 2 is what you want to do is you want to take your 1.5 by 7 inch pieces and put them right sides together. I'm going to show you how to strip piece. So when we put them right sides together, they look like this. Obviously, I'm going to sit down real quickly and show you how I'm going to piece this. 1/4 inch. Sorry, I had it slowed down there. Okay, so just so you can see, I've got this long strip sewn together. Now this one says to press towards the purple. So again, I'm going to put the purple on top. I'm going to set the seam, and then I'm going to lift the purple up And I kind of finger press it first, and then I just come back with the iron, lift and drop, push that seam nice and flat, okay? And that's what it looks like on the back. So notice the seams are pressed to one side. I'll explain next month why we do that in quilting, but what that creates also is this little ridge. And that little ridge is going to help us when we go to put these together. So then you're going to take this to your cutting surface, and you're going to put it down, and you're going to get your ruler, and we're going to cut 1.5 inch segments off of here. This time when you line your straight edge up though, you want to line a straight line on the seam line, not on the outside edges where they might have gotten distorted. We want our cut edges to be perpendicular to our seam line. So I'm going to slide that over, and I'm going to clean cut the edge. And then I'm going to come over, and now I'm going to cut 1.5 inch segments. So again, now I've got my black line lined up here, and this one on the seam. It's perfect. I'm going to cut one, and I'm going to cut, you're ultimately going to cut 4 of them. I won't make you watch me cut all 4, but I just wanted to show you what these look like. So you're going to have 4 of these little units, okay? Now, the next step is step 3, 4, and 4. You're going to take the, you're going to take your 4-inch purple seams, and you're going to sew one. This is color, it would be print 3 and print, so let me get it right, print 2 and print 3. So you're going to ultimately have 4-inch pieces of the other 2 colors in the block, and you're going to do exactly what I did with this one, sew them and cut them into 1.5 inch segments. Okay, so do I have one? So this is what one will look like. That's cut so you can see it. Okay, now I'm going to need to sew these together to get what's called a 4 match. I had you press towards the purple in both. So when we put them right sides together with purples on opposite sides, notice those 2 little ridges. If I line those right up, I can squish them in there, and they should lay nice and flat and basically lock themselves together. Now, I personally like to put a pin in there just to hold it. Whoops. This is not a good patchwork pin. This, okay? This is not a good patchwork pin. You're looking for pins that are very, very fine and thin. And this is actually longer than I normally like, but all I have to do is do that. And now I've got it held in place. I'm going to sew that 1/4 inch seam. It's always stressful to have people watch you sew. When I get to the seam, I'm going to pull the pin out because we don't sew over pins. And I'm going to cut my thread.
You have to lift the foot.
Sorry, my machine automatically raises the presser foot. I'm very spoiled. Okay? And then what you're going to have here is you see that beautiful little where they all come together? Now I have to press this. Now this instruction is going to you're always going to be pressing towards the colored piece. So I need to put that on top, and I need to lift it, and I kind of hold it and just put this iron down on that seam. Notice I'm not ironing it, I'm pressing it. Okay, so look how pretty that little 4 patches. Okay, so when we look at this, get the right corner. This is a pink one, this one. So when I look at this, this is what we're creating, and we've now gotten the center done. So you're going to have 2 of them that look like this, and 2 of them that have the gold or whatever color, that's either color 2, or print 2 or print 3 in the, up in the upper corner. Okay? Now, your next step with this is that you're going to come back and you are going to sew a 1.5 by 2.5 inch piece. And you're going to sew it on the color side, not these 3 sides. Okay, so that's how you know. And when you're making these corners, when you need to press, you're always going to press towards this piece. So when you're done, you're going to press this seam down. Then you're going to add a 1.5 by 3.5 piece to the side, and you're going to press that seam down. And now you have your corner. Okay? If you follow the pictures in the instructions, I do want to point out that when I sew this one on, I've got the 2.5 going on the top and the 6.5 on the side. But when I sew this one on, the 2.5 is going on the side and the 3.5 is going on the top. So just pay a little attention to that so you get your seams going in the right direction. Okay? So now I have 4 of these. So I have 4 like this, and I have 4 like this. All I have left is the center. So the center is a 9 patch. So not anything different than what we've already done, really. The big difference is that this time when we strip piece this, we are going to, and this is hard, we are going to sew basically a rail block. So it looks, and I could sew it, but I think you can get the idea. You're going to sew so it looks like this. So you're sewing a rail block, but then you're going to turn it like this and cut 2 1.5 inch segments out of it. So you'll end up with, do I have one? You'll end up with 2 segments that actually, if I put it this way, look like this and this. And so that you don't have to sew all the little pieces together. And then as a final exam, you do have to, this is a 1.5 inch square, this is a 1.5 inch square, and this one is. So you do have to sew the little 1.5 inch squares together, okay? And it's gonna show you which way to press your seams on there. And then when you sew that together, you'll get this really fun little 9 patch, okay? So we're working on a much smaller scale this year, which is going to be really good for you guys because it's really going to force you to be a little bit more accurate. Now, to assemble the block, it's really quite fun. I always take my design board like this and I lay the block out so that I know I have all my pieces going the way they're supposed to go. This goes in the middle, okay? And then this one goes like this. All right, so look how fun this is. Okay, so all these pieces should measure 3.5 inches. Now the downside of this block is the number of match points. So if you're a beginner, the important thing is when you sew these pieces together that you pin your match points first, which I'll show you here in just a second. But notice that the colors are an opposite, and notice that this color is basically the outside of this, and then this one is the outside of that one. So it's kind of fun how it all goes together. Now if I'm gonna sew this together, I'm gonna flip it over from my board and pick it up, and I pinch the side that needs to be sewn. When I go to line these up, whenever you have multiple match points in what you're putting together, it's important to pin the match points first. So I'm gonna pin that one. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pin this one. Okay. Then what I'm going to do, and I'll actually show you, is I'm going to start sewing here. When I get to this one, I'll pull this pin out. When I get to that one, I'll pull that one out. And then I force my ends. Now, I must have sewn pretty accurately because they line up beautifully. But I'm going to sew this so you can see kind of how that works. And I'll have the whole block sewn together by the time you come in and get it, and Katie. And again, I'm going to pull that out as soon as my needle gets to it, and sew the rest of the way. Now, and the reason I wanted to show you this, because do you see where those match points are? By pinning those and making sure there's no gap between these seams. Okay, they kiss each other. Just that pretty. And then I'm just going to take that again. I'm going to set my seam. I'm going to press that open or press it back. I like to come over here and make sure all my seams are nice and flat. And then there is, look how pretty that is. And you're going to just keep, I always bring this back, put it back down where it belongs, like this. So now that one's sewn, so I can flip this one over and I can take that and press and sew it. So that is how this block goes together. Okay. So that's your challenge this month. I hope you find that it's fun. I enjoyed it. I've made lots of them now, practicing and making sure everything works well. The special this month, we always do a special, is 15% off all your notions and your best press. Okay. The things I highly recommend are the 6.5-inch square and the 6.5 by 12.5-inch rulers for sure. We love Creative Grid because they don't slip and slide. They're easy to read. You're going to need a rotary cutter, mat, and mat if you don't have one. New year, new blade. If you haven't changed your blade since we started this last year, it's time. Okay. Your best press is going to give you that crispness. I highly, highly, highly recommend a mini iron. And I'm not saying this because I want you to buy it. When I work with these small pieces, my blocks are so much more accurate and when I use the smaller iron. And then what else is on my list? You're going to want to make sure you have all of these programs. Use a neutral thread, either a cream or a white. And then last but not least, if you don't have a 1/4-inch presser foot for your machine, make sure you know how to get a good 1/4-inch when you sew. If you're having trouble with that, get a hold of your machine manufacturer or whoever, wherever you bought your machine, and they should sell a patchwork foot that lets you do a real accurate 1/4-inch seam. Other than that, we are good. Next month we'll have more probably announcements and things to show you, but the first month tends to run long because we have so much to talk about. So with that, I'm going to leave you, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call the store, send us an email, and we'll get you answers as fast as we can. We do have extra fabric in the store for boo-boos, so if you cut something wrong, don't stress, just hide it into the store and they'll have some pieces that you can have. All right, that's it. See you guys next month.